Welcome, everyone. It feels very weird talking to complete emptiness, but I have enabled the public chat, so feel free to leave me any questions that you might have throughout the discussion. And yeah, so today I was asked to sort of create a simulation of a university lecture, of how a university lecture would look like if you were already students. And I decided to talk about artificial intelligence and Shakespeare, and basically what does artificial intelligence have in common with Shakespeare. I'm not entirely sure how to, well, I'll just make of it what I will. Okay, so yes, the question for today is to IA or not to IA? That is the question. And I want to basically create a bridge between a modern technology and the days when Shakespeare was created. And I think all of you already know who Shakespeare is. And Shakespeare was a prolific writer in the early, sort of in the middle of the 16th century and then the beginning of the 17th century, and he's the bard of all English literature. And even though we tend to think of him as an author who wrote a lot of original works, a lot of his plays were actually written in collaboration with other writers. And recent research suggests Shakespeare didn't pen the history play Henry VIII by himself. And machine learning has revealed how much of Shakespeare's play exactly was written by someone else. And as I mentioned previously, the play in question today is Shakespeare's Henry VIII. A history play of which there has been a long suspicion that part of it was actually written by someone else. A little bit about the play itself. It was first staged around 1613 during the time of history, which is known as early modern drama period, on the banks of the River Thames in London, where the King's Men performed Shakespeare's plays. At the time, there was another quite famous playwright called John Fletcher, who actually finished some of Shakespeare's play after he died. And whereas whereas Fletcher has disappeared from the traces of history pretty much as a playwright, by the 1850s, a literary analyst, James Spedding, noticed remarkable similarities between Fletcher's works and some of Shakespeare's earlier works. Spedding then concluded in the 1800s that Shakespeare and Fletcher must have collaborated on Henry VIII during Shakespeare's life already. But there has long been a debate among Shakespearean scholars of how much Fletcher actually contributed to this piece, and what the role of both of these authors was in creating Henry VIII. So basically, this method was unresolved for about 400 years until 2019, when Peter Plechach and the might of artificial intelligence helped us figure out whether Shakespeare indeed collaborated with John Fletcher in this play. And Peter Plechach started off with a seemingly simple question. Why don't we try to use machine learning to identify who wrote Henry VIII after all? And he more or less tried to look at every single line of the play. So what is exactly this machine learning? So artificial intelligence and machine learning is a sophisticated pattern recognition technology, As a branch of artificial intelligence, machine learning relies on working with small to large data sets, the kind of algorithm that you train on a body of data, which is then able to recognize the patterns that were picked up in that particular body of data. And this basically widespread has been used with images, and the algorithms can also be trained to spot and recognize objects in pictures. This can also be used for speech recognition, but apparently, as this research has shown, it can also be used to something as subtle as style of writing. Not just the words, but the style by which the text is composed. Of course, undeniably, the style of the author can and does change throughout their lifetime, and they can write in different styles. Plehach ensured that he was looking at Shakespeare's and Fletcher's styles of writing from the same period, and these included Shakespeare's plays from roughly the same time period, such as The Winter's Tale, The Tragedy of Cymbeline, The Tempest, and The Tragedy of Coriolanus. He then did the same with several works known to have been written by Fletcher, such as Monsieur Thomas, Valentinian, Bonduca, and The Woman's Prize. He then set system to work on Henry VIII. So once the algorithm from Shakespeare's and Fletcher's styles of writing of the same period was trained, it was applied to the very play in question. What is interesting is that basically the results pretty much were in contention with what Spedding said, that basically Henry VIII was written by Shakespeare together with John Fletcher. Moreover, the algorithm even ruled out another speculative collaborator, playwright Philip Messenger. It also revealed that not only were the parts composed by Shakespeare and Fletcher, but that they must have collaborated much more closely on the piece, because there is no clear distinction between the scenes. And you can see in this slide, in the next slide, so blue is for Shakespeare and green is for Fletcher, and this is what the IA, the language generating machine learning generated basically. And overall Fletcher's work amounts, as you can see, to almost half of Henry VIII. So it's a fairly significant collaboration that the two playwrights had together. And when addressing this recent breakthrough of the mutual authorship of Henry VIII, Sandra Peter of Sydney Business Insight asks a very simple question. So what? How can artificial intelligence and Shakespeare go together? What is the use of it? And curiously, this question generates a multitude of answers which lead to more open-ended questions that are worthy of considerations. It can be argued, to borrow Peter's words, that this is interesting because we can train artificial intelligence now on things such as literary style. So you could look at this purely from the research point of view and say, look, this is a nice technology innovation. Yet if you think about it even more deeply, this can be applied in practice in different areas. We might also ask ourselves, what good does it do to actually go back and demystify the writing process of Henry VIII? That the play was only written half by Shakespeare and half by someone else. We can reconsider the idea how artificial intelligence is helping us to rethink or rewrite history. So basically, in other words, it's not just changing how we look at things going forward, but how we look at things going back. So a lot of literary works that we attributed to great lonely geniuses can now be reinterpreted through the lens of artificial intelligence. and we might find more collaboration of this sort in works that were considered to be of single authorship. The concepts of copyright and authorship during the early modern period did not exist as we know them today. And machine learning applied to early modern printed text might reveal more nuanced processes of collaborative writing during the period. In addition, it shows how linguists and literary scholars are using machine learning to better understand our literary past, even maybe inviting us to reconsider the significance of great historical, literary, and artistic figures. So I guess this sort of concludes my very brief and very dense simulation of a part of how a university lecture would look like. And I wonder whether I could do the poll now to... Yes. So I've created a little poll, basically a little quiz out of all the questions and information that I covered in this brief introduction. And I'm very curious to see how much you can remember from the 10 minutes that I spent talking about the connection that Shakespeare carries to artificial intelligence. So now you should be able to see question number 1. Good. Someone click on the Tempest, and I did mention Tempest, but the context in which I mentioned is that before Plehach carried out his algorithm on Henry VIII, he first had to upload certain works by Shakespeare and Fletcher into the system of the same period in order to determine their literary styles. And the play in question was actually Henry VIII. Excellent. Let's move to the second question, which I wonder, how do I do this? Let me see. Okay, now question number 2. What is machine learning? And you have 3 options. A language virtual assistant would be something like Siri, rather than a machine learning a language. Good. Excellent. So yes, indeed, a machine learning system is a sophisticated pattern recognition technology, as Plehach's research has shown. Right, let's move to the next question. What did Peter Plehach's research reveal? Excellent. So I see that most of you have indeed chosen the correct answer, that Henry VIII was a collaborative play written between Shakespeare and John Fletcher. And the last question is more sort of to rather a dream than a reality at this point. And yes, indeed, there have been a few attempts to try to do this. And basically, again, for the machine learning, the human touch is very much needed. So you need someone to upload this vast amount of data of literary styles into the machine. And you can find some articles on the internet, sort of rather trials of people trying to generate Shakespearean sonnets, which is also very interesting, by creating an algorithm out of Shakespearean language used in sonnets and seeing whether the machine can generate a new sonnet. Although, you know, the machine would still be recycling the same patterns of speech. Okay, so I guess that sort of concludes my brief talk, and thank you all for coming, and thank you for those who joined. And I have enabled the public chat, so if you do have any questions, please leave them now, and I'll give you a few minutes for some of you to gather your thoughts if there's anything you want to ask me. But basically, whenever you go into university, you have to be prepared to encounter a much more sophisticated type of vocabulary of academic language. And I probably should have prefaced my talk by saying, but I myself am an English philologist, and after completing my undergraduate degree at Vilnius University, I won a scholarship and I went to study in the UK, where I read Shakespeare. And I was always very much interested into semantics, grammar, also literature. And recently I've been doing a lot of research on textual scholarship of Shakespeare and how this machine learning can help us reconsider and recreate certain lost written pieces of Shakespeare. So yeah, I can see that there are no questions. But yeah, thank you very much for coming and have a great day. I hope you're all keeping happy and healthy. And yeah, thank you.